foreign policy as the following. I don't want to run the world. I don't know how to run the world. The Constitution doesn't give me the authority to run the world. We ought to mind our own business. And I would sum up my domestic policy as the following. I don't want to run your life. I don't know how to run your life. The Constitution doesn't give me the authority to run your life. We ought to respect individual liberty in this country. That was Ron Paul's message.
Could it all be a bad dream or a nightmare? Is it my imagination, or have we lost our minds? It's surreal. It's just not believable. A grand absurdity, a great deception, a delusion of momentous proportions. Based on preposterous notions and on ideas whose time should never have come. Simplicity, grossly distorted and complicated. Insanity, passed off as logic. Grandiose schemes built on falsehoods with the morality of Ponzi and Madoff. Evil described as virtue. Ignorance pawned off as wisdom. Destruction and impoverishment in the name of humanitarianism. Violence, the tool of change. Preventive wars used as a road to peace. Tolerance delivered by government guns. Reactionary views in the guise of progress. An empire replacing the republic. Slavery sold as liberty. Excellence and virtue traded for mediocrity. Socialism to save capitalism. A government out of control. Unrestrained by the Constitution, the rule of law, or morality. Bickering over petty politics as we collapse into chaos. The philosophy that destroys us is not even defined. We have broken from reality, a psychotic nation. Ignorance with a pretense of knowledge replacing wisdom. Money does not grow on trees, nor does prosperity come from a government printing press or escalating deficits. We're now in the midst of unlimited spending of the people's money, exorbitant taxation, deficits of trillions of dollars spent on a failed welfare warfare system, an epidemic of cronyism, unlimited supplies of paper money equated with wealth, a central bank that deliberately destroys the value of the currency in secrecy, without restraint, without nary a whimper. Yet, cheered on by the pseudo-capitalists of Wall Street, the military-industrial complex, and Detroit. We police our world empire with troops on 700 bases and in 130 countries around the world. A dangerous war now spreads throughout the Middle East and Central Asia. Thousands of innocent people being killed as we become known as the torturers of the 21st century. We assume that by keeping the already known torture pictures from the public's eye, we will be remembered only as a generous and good people. If our enemies want to attack us only because we are free and rich, proof of torture would be irrelevant. The sad part of all this is that we have forgotten what made America great, good, and prosperous. We need to quickly refresh our memories and once again reinvigorate our love, understanding, and confidence in liberty. The status quo cannot be maintained considering the current conditions. Violence and lost liberty will result without some revolutionary thinking. We must escape from the madness of crowds now gathering. The good news is the reversal is achievable through peaceful and intellectual means, and fortunately, the number of those who care are growing exponentially.
Madam Speaker, I have a few questions for my colleagues. What if our foreign policy of the past century is deeply flawed and has not served our national security interests? What if we wake up one day and realize that the terrorist threat is a predictable consequence of our meddling in the affairs of others and has nothing to do with us being free and prosperous? What if propping up repressive regimes in the Middle East endangers both the United States and Israel? What if occupying countries like Iraq and Afghanistan and bombing Pakistan is directly related to the hatred directed toward us? What if someday it dawns on us that losing over 5,000 American military personnel in the Middle East since 9/11 is not a fair trade-off for the loss of nearly 3,000 American citizens, no matter how many Iraqi, Pakistani, and Afghan people are killed or displaced. What if we finally decide that torture, even if called enhanced interrogation technique, is self-destructive and produces no useful information, and that contracting it out to a third world nation is just as evil? What if it is finally realized that war and military spending is always destructive to the economy?
Look, how else can you say it than what we're doing this weekend? It's this simple. The Ron Paul revolution is back. It's back, and it's in the Libertarian Party this time.
What they know to be true, and they know you are not going to modify the message to please them, because your goal is not to please them. It is to educate them. It is to make sure that they who do not discuss human freedom every day understand that it is natural, understand that it comes from our humanity, understand that it can't be taken away by the government by a majority vote. You see, the government thinks if they do something by a majority vote, that makes it right. While the tyranny of the majority can be as hateful, as harmful, as hurtful, as destructive as the tyranny of a madman. Our rights are natural to our humanity, and they're not subject to the majority's wishes. If all the world but one believes in something, it would be no more right for the world to silence the one than it would for the one had he the power to silence the world. Boy, sometimes in that campaign of 2008, it seemed like the one was Ron Paul, the one willing to take on the Republican establishment and, candidly, some of my colleagues at my day job, was able to manifest the type of courage that put goosebumps on our arms and tears in our eyes, because he is the personification of personal liberty in a free society, because he is the godfather. I know this isn't New Jersey, forgive me. The founding father of the liberty movement that we understand today. When I speak to young people, I often like to end with a little bit of an emotional zing. And I'll repeat it to you now, though it's not the last words I'm going to say to you. I say this: I expect that when I die, I will do so in my bed, in my bedroom, in my home, surrounded by those who love me, faithful to first principles. But some of you must be prepared to die in a government prison, faithful to first principles. And some of you must be prepared to die in a public square to the sound of the government's trumpets blaring, faithful to first principles. When the time comes, you will know what to do, because freedom lies not in the head, but in the heart, in every human heart. But it must do more than just lie there. In the case of Ron Paul, we have the happy warrior of human freedom, who has exercised that great bold heart of his, exuding that love of humanity and freedom more effectively, more clearly, more articulately than anybody in our era today. He is, quite frankly, for those of us in the liberty movement, not only its creator in the modern era, but the standard against whom all of us measure ourselves. Ladies and gentlemen, he is, of course, the creator of this movement. He is, of course, the incarnation, the Word made flesh of personal liberty in a free society. And he is the man who proved Lord Acton wrong. Ladies and gentlemen, friends and colleagues, Congressman Ron Paul.
In many ways, our founders were geniuses. The Constitution was far from perfect. It had some serious flaws at the beginning, but I'm convinced it was the best document as a contract between the people and the government. And yet, not too long after it was established, the erosion started. But I would say that in the last 100 years, there's been serious erosion. But it's more rapid now than ever before. I think our freedoms are disappearing. I think what was happening today is you as a generation are inheriting a mess. You're inheriting a mess. It's overcommitment overseas, overcommitment here at home with an entitlement system, and you'll be inheriting a currency that has no value. The value depends on trust, and the trust is waning, and therefore the value of the currency is going down. So you're inheriting this, and you as a generation will make a decision. But the basic question you have to ask is, what should the role of government be? The founders asked that question, and they came up with a pretty good answer. They said the role of government ought to be about one thing: protect liberty. That's the purpose of government. That should be the And it should be the purpose of all political action, is to protect liberty. Now, some don't believe that should be so limited because they believe that the government has to do a lot more. The government has to have safety nets. Safety net for the business people, safety net for everybody else for whatever reason. Anybody who has a need needs a safety net. And they've lost conviction that freedom works a lot better than central economic planning. But central economic planning fails. I think one of the reasons why we've gotten a lot more attention this year than this message has gotten in the past is the recognition that government is failing. Because when you have a free society and you have sound money and free markets, you have tremendous prosperity. And we became the freest and the most prosperous country in the world in all of history. But all of a sudden, people are feeling not so rich anymore, and they're realizing that it's based on debt. And it is this recognition that the government fails. I think a good demonstration of the failure of government has to do with how the central government, how our federal government took care of all the victims of the Hurricane Katrina. All of a sudden, we're dependent on the government. The government builds the levees, and the government's supposed to bail out the water when the levees break. And all of a sudden, they didn't do a very good job. They sent a lot of money. I mean, the Congress immediately did what they're supposed to do, appropriate more money. But the job was overwhelming. They said, well, let's pass up some checks because people need some money. So they started passing out $2,000 checks to anybody who got in line. And lo and behold, the lines got long, and the people from outside New Orleans got in line. And then the government discovered it. And they say, oh, they shouldn't have done that because the wrong people got the money. We're going to send them a letter, and we're going to tell them they weren't qualified for that, and we want you to send the money back. And it just doesn't work, but I think it typifies it. Foreign policy. I mean, how successful on foreign policy? We're supposed to spread democracy, but we've been doing that since Woodrow Wilson. Woodrow Wilson was the idealist. He said, we're going to, make the world safe for democracy. But just think of what's happened in the last 100 years.
What's going on in the country? What are the problems that we're facing? And as you guys in this room know, it's a lot more than the craziness that's been going on over the last 2 years. It's really like the craziness that's been going on over the last 120 years that we're dealing with, okay? That's culminated in the craziness of the last 2 years. So what's the big problem in America? Well, let's think about it. Okay, number one, progressives, okay? The main problem here is progressives, starting with the original progressive era, which gave us the income tax and the Federal Reserve and the military-industrial complex, starting with the First World War, the FBI, the three-letter agencies, and the New Deal. They gave us the warfare state and the welfare state and the central bank. But it's not completely hopeless, because to fight the progressives, we have the conservatives. And the conservatives only have one little problem, which is that they're a bunch of progressives. So, if you can get past that, they're pretty good. So the conservatives in America all endorse the central bank and the warfare state and the welfare state and everything that was wrong with the original progressive era. Conservatives, at their best, are fighting for what progressives believed in 7 years ago. That's when they're at their absolute best. Conservatives are saying like, hey, let's go back to Barack Obama. They're like progressives, let's say, I just came up with this, driving the speed limit, okay? And just right off the top of my head. This is always, without a doubt, it fails. Ask anyone in the conservative movement today about Obamacare, and they'll start talking to you about how we have to, cover pre-existing conditions. Like, they can't even go back beyond just the most recent, and this is why they lose every single battle. What are conservatives doing even when they're fighting kind of the right battle? Like so we have the indoctrination in public schools, like the latest iteration of it, which I will admit is particularly troubling. But conservatives will stand up and they will say, no, sexual propagandizing of my child until the 4th grade. We're taking a stand here, all right? But why is it that they can never actually win? Because look at from the other flip side, what are they conceding? They're conceding that you can do it from 4th grade through 12th grade, and then through the universities as well. So conservatives never win because they're never attacking the root of the problem. What we stand for is attacking the root of the problem. We stand for repealing the entire progressive era. That's what our movement is about.
And we will remain a danger to the Federal Reserve System as well. Yes. And the Fed, right, and the Fed. Studying monetary history from the beginning of our country and even throughout all our history, monetary policy on periodic occasions will become the dominant issue. And we have emphasized that, and it has become an important issue. Just think, this is the first presidential campaign that the subject ever came up since the Federal Reserve was started. So we are now, because of what is happening, it will remain a dominant issue. There's no way they're going to put it to bed because they have destroyed our money. It's worldwide. There's a financial crisis going on, and it's only sound money and personal liberty that can solve the crisis that we have today. So much, it was a sneaky, deceitful way to pay the bills. An honest government that wants to be a big spending government would tax the people, and then the people would know what they were doing. If we had to pay taxes for everything that they do, the people would rise up and stop it. So then they started borrowing money a lot, and then people didn't notice that quite as much because they passed that on. But then they resorted to the printing of the money, and that is why the Federal Reserve was established, to take care of the powerful interests, the military-industrial complex, the banking system, and deficit financing. And there's a couple reasons they have deficit financing. Sometimes there are conservatives that want deficit financing, and sometimes there are liberals who want deficit financing. And they have resorted to this, and of course this is why we are facing this crisis today. But it also serves those interests who like to think that we have this responsibility. They claim it's a moral responsibility to take our young people, put them into the military, and send them hither and yon around the world, policing the world and using up the money. So just as we have been able to bring to the forefront that most important issue of funny money, fiat money, the paper money system, the Federal Reserve, we have brought to the forefront. Others have tokenly talked about it. They get in office and they do nothing about it. But right now, it is this liberty movement, which is seen as a patriotic movement, an individual liberty movement, that is saying to the country and to the world, we've had enough of sending our kids and our money around the world to be the policemen of the world. It's the time to bring them home. Bring them home. one thing is we do know they will come home. My goal and our goal has always been to bring them home in a deliberate fashion to avoid major economic crisis by destroying our economy by spending so much overseas. In the last 10 years, the wars that have gone on added $4 trillion of debt. And I don't think we have been one bit safer for it. I think we have been less safe because of all the money that we have spent overseas. So this is the issue now. It is an issue that I think is crucial. Jim mentioned in the introduction that, so often they say that if we tell people that we think we should spend less in the military, they say, oh, that means you want to cut defense. No, if you cut the military-industrial complex, you cut more profiteering, but you don't take one penny out of national defense.
Of course, it could all be a bad dream, a nightmare, and that I'm seriously mistaken, overreacting, and that my worries are unfounded. I hope so, but just in case, we ought to prepare ourselves for revolutionary changes in the not-too-distant future.
And people woke up and understood that the official reasons for going to war are almost always based on lies and promoted by war propaganda in order to serve special interests. What if we as a nation came to realize that the quest for empire eventually destroys all great nations? What if Obama has no intention of leaving Iraq? What if a military draft is being planned for the wars that will spread if our foreign policy is not changed? What if the American people learn the truth, that our foreign policy has nothing to do with national security, that it never changes from one administration to the next? What if war and preparation for war is a racket serving special interests? What if President Obama is completely wrong about Afghanistan and turns out worse than Iraq and Vietnam put together? What if Christianity actually teaches peace and not preventive wars of aggression? What if diplomacy is found to be superior to bombs and bribes in protecting America? What happens if my concerns are completely unfounded? Nothing. But what happens if my concerns are justified and ignored? Nothing good. And I yield back the balance of my time.
Each of us must choose which course of action we should take. Education, conventional political action, or even peaceful civil disobedience to bring about necessary changes. But let it not be said that we did nothing. Let not those who love the power of the welfare warfare state label the dissenters of authoritarianism as unpatriotic or uncaring. Patriotism is more closely linked to dissent than it is to conformity and a blind desire for safety and security. Understanding the magnificent rewards of a free society makes us unbashful in its promotion. Fully realizing that maximum wealth is created and the greatest chance for peace comes from a society respectful of individual liberty. And Madam Speaker, I yield back the balance of my time.